This presentation is going to go over a quick introduction to color and design with lots of vocabulary and examples. So feel free to take some notes as we go and learn or relearn some new terminology about how we use colors in graphic design. Color theory is the logical structure for color and how we talk about the philosophy, the use, and the effect of different colors within art and design. There are three basic categories of color theory that are helpful to understand: the color wheel, color harmony, and the context of how colors are used. The color wheel is a tool for artists and designers to use it to talk about color and the relationships of color. So when you look at the color wheel, what you're seeing is the spectrum, white light being broken down like it would be in a prism in that top picture, and it creates the spectrum, or what we think of as the rainbow. And then we curve that and make it into a circle. So it becomes this wheel, and that is the color space where colors exist. So if you look at the very simplified one, you'll see it's broken down into 12 segments of primary, secondary, and tertiary colors. But as we work digitally, we'll see color space of the color wheel much different, with lots of transitions between colors and ranges um, of the possibilities of color. Important terms to understand when it comes to color: hue is the color name or the color in its purest form. It's what makes red red and blue blue. It's the specific individual nature of the color. That's hue. Value is the lightness or darkness of a hue, and intensity refers to the brightness or dullness of a hue. That's the saturation or the chroma of a color. And you'll hear it called all of that kind of all of those three words. You'll hear saturation, chroma, or intensity. So, for an example, getting more into the ideas of hues, hues are broken down into different colors. So we have our primary colors, which are red, yellow, and blue. Our secondary colors, orange, green, and violet. And then our intermediate, also called tertiary colors, like red, orange, yellow, green. And that's, you kind of learn that when you learn the basics of color mixing, working with these different hues. Value is that dark to light. So when you're painting, you add more white to get a tint, the lighter color of the lighter version of the color. And for a shade, you usually add black, sometimes something else, to make it get darker. So when a color is lighter or darker, you're changing the value of that color. Intensity or chroma or saturation has to do with how much color is in the color. So, thinking about how bright a color might be or how dull a color might be would be describing the high intensity or low intensity of a color. And so, these are different examples that kind of show those ideas. Usually, when you take away all of the color, you're getting into the world of neutrals that are very gray. Um, and I always like to kind of point out how you can have a dark, bright color, or you can have a dark, dull color. You can have a light, bright color. So intensity and value work together, and you can have different combinations of them as you're describing colors. Other important terms when it comes to color is color temperature. That is assigned kind of how it feels like it would feel, if that makes sense. So you have warm colors and cool colors, and there's some examples here. Typically, warm and cool are kind of broken between like warms being the red, orange, and yellows, and the cools being the greens, blues, and purples. But there's a little overlap in between, kind of that line where the yellows and the red violets can be, and the yellow greens. So you'll see typically it drawn somewhere in there, but the cool colors are going to have a lot of that blue and purple, and the warm colors are going to have that red and orange. So you can kind of see where they pull into there. And then we have those neutrals that I mentioned earlier. They're not really colors, but it's really helpful to classify. Like, they're not coming out of the color scheme, right? We've kind of taken the color out of those colors, but it's helpful to have uh, that vocabulary to start working with blacks and grays and browns and whites. Color harmony is the next kind of section to transition to. And this is where it gets really fun to kind of experiment and think about what works, what brings a pleasing feeling to the visuals, what makes it feel like it makes sense, that it's balanced, or does it become more chaotic because it's not harmonious? So, color harmony is created by the choice of colors, or what we call a color scheme or a palette within a work. Examples of color schemes or color palettes, people use both of those terms, would be monochromatic, complementary, triadic, and analogous. Those are going to be some of the ones we take a look at. Here is a great visual to show that, but we're going to go deeper into each one. So monochromatic is a color scheme that uses only one hue, um, but all of its values to create a really unifying and harmonious effect. So when you look at these examples, you're seeing, for example, the one with the hair, rabbit, bunny, whatever it is, that it's really this like, it's red, violet is the main color used, and just little variations of lighter and darker versions of that reddish violet throughout the illustration. Gives it a big sense of unity. It definitely has kind of a calming effect on it because the colors are very similar and close. And you'll see that in each of these. And sometimes you'll see like the one illustration with the photo and the hand and the little guys. Um, that one, has a little green in it, has a little yellow, but it's overall the same color. So when we start describing designs and artwork, you can choose, what really stands out the most. It might not be only monochromatic, but what really stands out in the work and the use of color. Here's more examples of monochromatic. Complementary colors are colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. And complementary colors give a lot of contrast to each other. They really create some dynamic energy in a design. And so, and you'll also see them a lot in logos, especially like sports teams and things like that. I'm sure you can think of some sport teams right now that use blue and orange, or they use red and green, or they use purple and yellow. These are, again, examples that are mostly done with complementary colors, and they really pop. They really have a lot of vibrancy in them. Triadic colors create a triangle on the color scheme. So it's not right across from each other. It's as if you drew a triangle in the circle. Within the circle, you'd be getting those colors. So red, yellow, and blue, purple, green, and yellow. Using those three colors primarily create an interesting color scheme that again works really well with contrast and just shares some really cool properties to create a design. Analogous colors are colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. So this isn't just changing the value like we saw in monochromatic. This is different because they're sharing qualities of color because they're close to each other. They're related, but they are going into different worlds. So when you use orange, and red, or you use blue, blue, green, and green, kind of sharing those colors space on the color wheel creates this sense of balance and unity within a design, um, to really have some emotional effects on it. Then you can look at color temperature, like when we talked about warm and cool. You can see how artists and designers use that in their work to, again, create an impact and an effect when you look at it. And the last category of topic for now is the idea of the effect of color. So these links in the presentation and these example graphics here, a lot of them go into interior design or the psychology of color with branding and different kinds of emotional impacts and all different ideas. But it's really cool to think about how colors affect us emotionally and how we are drawn or how we react to different color spaces, and whether they're personal effects, cultural effects, what we bring and respond to in terms of color. And so these are all just more examples of kind of seeing how people categorize them. And this guide on the left shows how brands fall into different categories of color and emotion, and what that might say about these different brands and companies and what they're trying to communicate. With all of this information, you're going to get a chance now to go and practice and experiment, do some studies, do some quizzes, and kind of see what you are drawn to and make sense out of color in graphic design while we start to incorporate more thoughtful choices in our own design work in class. Let me know if you have any questions.